Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. My name is Dr. Drum McNaughton, and I'm the CEO of The Change Leader, a management consultancy that helps university leaders create sustainable higher ed institutions through holistic approaches to strategic management, university academics and operations, change management, leadership, and governance. Our podcast brings you the latest in higher ed news, as well as some of the top experts in our profession who will share with you their perspectives on how you can grow your institution. Growing enrollment is critical for small Christian colleges, and there's no one better at it than Dr. Dewey Clark, the 7th president of North Carolina Wesleyan College. Dr. Clark's a great example of a leader who understands the business of education and what's needed to be successful in the 21st century. He brings a unique perspective to his job, having been in both education and with the dark side, corporate America, for his career. Following graduation from North Carolina Wesleyan in 1982, he was invited to stay at the college to serve in the admissions office, where he remained for 7 years and became its associate dean for admissions. In 1990, Dr. Clark joined MBM Corporation, a national customized food distributor, where he rose to the position of Executive Director of Strategic Planning and managed the company's $7 billion annual operating plan and analyzed their business acquisitions. Dr. Clark served on North Carolina Wesleyan's Board of Trustees for 12 years in multiple roles, including chair, before becoming its president in 2014. Since then, he's doubled enrollment and has added $110 million to the economic impact of the region. He understands higher ed and business, and with this unique skill set, is setting the tone for a high-performing higher ed institution. Dewey, thanks for being on the program. Really appreciate your time today.
Sure, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Well, I was intrigued when I read the article that you just did recently about Rock the Mount, and I really wanted to understand because it sounds like North Carolina Wesleyan is a really special place. You've been associated with now for almost 40 years, and so what makes it special?
Well, I think the people do. The word college comes from the Greek word colleague, which is a collection of people. So I think our people are very, very special. I think they care about the students. They put the students first. And when I got here, I was very intentional to make sure that anybody that we hired, I had interviewed. I interview every single person, whether it's a maintenance person or a coach or a faculty person or a VP. I interview every single person. I want them to see the vision of North Carolina Wesleyan College that I have, which is a place where young people can go and develop the way I did.
That's amazing. I've never heard of any other president who does that. How many folks do you have on staff? Staff, students, faculty?
Well, we have about 220 faculty and staff combined. Our student body is about 1,100. It was 575 when I got here about 4.5 years ago. So we've almost doubled in 4.5 years.
Wow, that's amazing. And this is in an era where enrollments are declining except for online education. So what's your key for doing this?
Well, we started really looking at our market area, which is primarily Eastern North Carolina and Southeast Virginia. And we said that's where most of our alumni are from. And that was where most of our current students were from at that time when we were 575, but we were recruiting all up and down the East Coast. It was sort of a shotgun approach. So we really contracted our market area to Eastern North Carolina and to Southeast Virginia, and it started paying immediate dividends. We did a lot of marketing. We did a lot of radio. We did a lot of billboards, that kind of thing. So right now, 75% of our students are from that geography that I talked about. The other 25% are from the world. We have students from about 40 different foreign countries. We have 110 foreign students on this campus. So how do we recruit them not taking international trips? Well, we process them better than anybody else. It's all about, that personal touch on the computer. That sounds like a contradiction. But when we get their information, we'll Skype them, we'll call them, we'll email them. We just want to be the very best at processing international referrals as we can be. So that's yielded great dividends for us. I think when students come here to visit, we roll out the red carpet. We really do a lot of special things for them. We've orchestrated the entire campus tour. Every part of it is orchestrated, right down to who they eat lunch with and that kind of thing. So it's paid huge dividends.
Well, that's neat. So you've focused your marketing approach, and your brand promise is absolutely there. You are what you say you are. You're very mission and vision driven, as well as the personal touch bringing students on. Students have changed, I would assume, in the last 35 years, because you got your career start, not only undergraduate there at North Carolina Wesleyan, but you were one of the few who were extended an invitation to actually work in the admissions office afterwards.
I did. So I graduated in 1982, and I went to work almost immediately in the admissions office. And things were quite different then. We wrote, handwritten letters. We did a lot of phone calls, and they still do a fair amount of that. But you have to realize that these students today are very technology driven. They're very social media driven. So you have to meet them where they are. You have to have a presence on Facebook and Instagram and all these other social media outlets. Texting obviously is very, very popular. Email is almost a thing of the past, but you have to do that. And you have to also be cognizant of the fact that you're recruiting the parents too. The decision is going to be made on the way home, or the discussion is going to be had on the way home, and the parents are going to weigh in. They're the ones that are paying for it in most cases. So you have to make sure that the parents feel good about it. You have to have some commonality, but it's almost two different messages. The students really don't care that much about things like security. They think they're invincible, but the parents are looking at things like that. So you have to have a lot of commonality in the message, but you have to realize that you're delivering it to two different groups there.
And actually, you've got a third group, a demographic that you have to worry about as well, is your business community. Who's going to be hiring your graduates? So you need to make sure that your curriculum is up to date, that it's meeting the needs of people who are going to hire your graduates. Is that a selling point for you?
It is, and it's an area of focus for us. I think that's one reason we've been able to grow, is because we've enhanced our career services area, and we put a lot of emphasis from day one, actually from the prospective student visit until graduation, on what does your resume look like? Are you ready? Are you prepared to do an interview? Do you understand what a cover letter is? Etiquette dinners, job fairs, all those kind of things. We want to start making that student think about their career from the day they set foot on campus. And I think that's made a big difference. And the companies around here are starting to notice, and that's going to be a great thing.
Yeah. One of the things that you guys have done is what you call Rock the Mount. That is just amazing. Tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
So every year when the freshmen get here, they go through an orientation, and then it's capped off with a convocation speaker. And last year we had Colonel Allen West, and he came and he gave a very motivational speech. Then we bring in an alumni from 30 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever. They kind of talk about Wesleyan from their perspective and how it prepared them for the world. And then all the freshmen line up and they go through a tunnel, and I shake their hand, and there's other students there, and they're cheering them on, and it's a real exciting time. And then they come to the front of the administration building where there are vendors set up from the town, banks, different places, Chick-fil-A, churches, different organizations, Red Cross, etc. They give out things, and they're trying to get the students connected to the community. They're trying to get the students aware that they hire our students. We're trying to make sure they have some type of financial arrangements with the bank, that kind of thing. So that goes on for about 2 hours. We have a cookout. The cheerleaders are there. It's a very exciting time. So it seems to have grown each year in number of vendors. We're up well over 100. And then that afternoon, almost immediately, we have student organizations that come in, whether it's a Greek organization, fraternity or sorority, or any other club on campus. Then they set up, and so the students continue to mill around, most of the day. And it's a time where we're trying to connect the community with the new students. We're trying to connect new students with returning students. It's just a great time. And then the very next day, classes start.
What a great way to give students, and for many of them, this is their first time away from home. So what a great way to give them a new, quote, family to reach out to.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect them to a church or maybe a job or maybe an organization in town, maybe somebody like the Red Cross that they want to volunteer with or whatever. The YMCA is here. Maybe they want to join the Y Planet Fitness is here. Maybe they want to do that. So we're trying to turn Rocky Mount into a college town. So we've been here about 60 years and we're 4 miles north of Rocky Mount. And one of my greatest challenges when I got here was to try to get Rocky Mount to embrace North Carolina Wesleyan College. And fortunately, Rocky Mount's growing this way. The economic growth is heading north. But that 4 miles should not be a great divide. It should get narrower and narrower over time as more and more people in town hire our students, see our students eating in their restaurants, going to the movies, wearing the T-shirts. So, we're working on that, and it seems to be heading in the right direction.
That's great. And I know from reading some of the background on you, you've created a huge economic impact in the town. You've grown it, 110 million since you've been there in the chair?
That's right. So that number was done by NCICU, North Carolina Independent Colleges and Universities. That's the number that they give us of the economic impact of our college to this region. That includes if we hire a faculty person, obviously their wife comes to Rocky Mount, their children go to school, they get their haircut here, they buy gas here, their family comes to visit them. So I think it's a good number, but we've grown that number from, just over 100 million to well over 200 million. So we've been an economic engine, no doubt, in this area. And I envision this area around North Carolina Wesleyan College turning into a college village where more and more companies are around us. We've got a little bit of vacant land close by the college here, and it's being developed with student housing and restaurants and that kind of thing.
That's great news. Let's swap horses just a little bit, because I know you spent time in on the dark side in corporate America for a while, and you don't have the typical background of an academic. Tell the listeners a little bit about that and how it's really helped you in your presidency.
Well, when I left North Carolina Wesleyan College first time, or maybe it was the second time, because the first time was as a student and then I went into the admissions office. But whenever I left here, I went to a company called MBM. It's a food distribution company. And at that time, it was $100 million. And we put together strategic plans, and I was over strategic plans and budgeting. And it grew from about $100 million to $7 billion over 24 years. So we distributed all kinds of food products to restaurant chains like Golden Corral and Hardee's and Denny's and Red Lobster and Olive Garden and Chick-fil-A and restaurant chains like that. So, strategic planning was what I did, and budgeting. It's a very dynamic industry. It's a very competitive industry. It was where I really learned a whole lot about plans and putting them together and what goes behind them. A plan without a budget is just sort of a pipe dream. So I learned about that, and we were able to be very successful. And in 2012, Warren Buffett bought the company and rolled it under McLean. And I stayed another 2 years and then came back here as president in 2014.
So from a planning perspective and a budgeting perspective, it sounds like, and as we both know, those are critical skill sets to have when you're sitting in the president's seat. How does that impacted how you run North Carolina Wesleyan?
Well, everybody's different. Every leader, every manager is different. The position takes on the flavor of your personality. I'm very numbers driven. I'm very analytical. I like to analyze things. So I'm trying to get everybody here focused on numbers. I mean, I don't want to ever become impersonal because, again, as I said earlier, that's who we are. But at the same time, you have to focus on the numbers and try to improve. We have a mantra around here called continuous improvement. And every day I try to look for something where we need to improve or we have improved. And I'll send a picture out and I'll say good quality. And if it's something that we need to improve on, I'll send a picture out and says bad quality. So we're always looking, trying to celebrate the things that we've done, but also be looking at things. How can we improve this area? And I want everybody to think that when they leave the campus today, it was better than when they came here this morning. If everybody will get in that mindset, then we'll become a very, very special place. And U.S. and World Report just came out with their regional rankings. And 3 years ago, we were number 63 in the Southeast, and we've moved up to number 37, 26 places in 3 years. So I think it's catching on. I think people are seeing that there's a whole lot to improve. There's a whole lot of things we can do better. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But there's plenty of things that are broke and need to be fixed. So that's what we're trying to work on.
So what I'm hearing is three things, really. There's the planning and the budgeting is one. It's a culture of continuous improvement. And also you're hiring, everybody comes in. It's a people place, but it's also a numbers place. And you're there almost as the final QA because you want a hand in everybody who comes in to make sure that they buy into this vision and mission that you have for the place. Does that sound like a fair summation?
It does. And the people, I don't want to sound like I'm being contradictory here because I've talked so much about numbers, but it comes down to people at the end of the day. You got to have the right people. And if you have those in every position, you need a game changer, as we call them. You can have a game changer in maintenance. It's a guy that he's having a bad day if he sees a McDonald's cup on the front lawn. I mean, he's just determined that that's never going to happen. That guy's a game changer because people start to form an impression of our college as soon as they drive in. As soon as they drive in the front gate, they start to form an impression about our English major or our soccer team or whatever. So we want to make sure that this campus is the most beautiful college campus in America. We have a ways to go, but we've made a lot of progress.
And obviously you have made progress because your enrollment has doubled over the 4.5 years you've been there. One of the challenges that you see, though, with organizations that grow is sustaining that growth. I mean, we've all seen many organizations that grow too fast and ultimately they don't have the infrastructure. So what do you do? And I know it's a conscious decision. What do you do to make sure your growth's sustainable?
Well, at the end of the year, you have to make sure that you've made some money. You have to be profitable because then that buys you tomorrow. So, you have to be cognizant of that. And, sometimes when you're growing, you're not as profitable as you would like to be. And you have to be aware of that too. But at the end of the day, if you don't make money, you go out of business. So you have to be aware of that. You have to try to quantify all the big decisions that you're making, whether it's adding a major or a program or a sport. You have to quantify it as best you can. And then you have to hold yourself accountable to make sure that you're hitting those targets. So that's what you do. I think it's a whole lot easier to grow to prosperity than to cut your way to prosperity. So, our target from day one has been 100 students a year. And we've averaged about 95. And we've had a really, really good year. We've had a break-even year, and then we had a year that wasn't so good. But over the 3 years that I've put together the budget, we've made about $250,000 in total. That's not a lot of money. I think that's going to get better over time. Growth costs, it does cost. But again, I think it's easier to grow and more sustainable to grow than stay flat or even decline.
Oh, absolutely. And do you have, when you bring on a new program or you do something, do you look at things as a loss leader or do they need to be profitable right off the bat?
Well, it's okay if they're not profitable right off the bat, if there is a path for them to get, to a point where they are profitable. And then some things you do, they're never going to be profitable, but they're in the whole basket of what you're doing. So there's value added to them. You do try to quantify as many things as you can, but it's hard to quantify, the career services culture or the career emphasis culture. It's hard to quantify that. Maybe in retention, you can see an uptick, but it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do to put a lot of emphasis on a career and the end of their education here, what they're going to do next. But how do you quantify that? So it's hard in some cases, but you try to do it in as many cases as you can. That makes sense.
Yeah. And when our firm does strategic planning, we talk about you quantify outcomes, not processes. And so if you're looking at the bigger picture, what's it doing for your retention? What's it doing for bringing in new students? That's more of a bigger picture than just trying to quantify, your student services aspect.
That's right.
We're getting close to the end of the time. Just a couple more questions. You've been in the job now 4.5 years. Your memory is still fresh from when you first walked through the door. We all know that first 100 days of a president's tenure is critical. Mm-hmm. What advice could you give colleagues who are walking through the door sometime in the next 6 months and help them to be more successful?
Well, it was a little unique for me because of my long association with the college. Having been the chairman of the board, I certainly knew a whole lot about Wesleyan and having gone to school here. And then the way I managed, I felt like it was just a continuation of what I'd done at MBM. However, I'm not minimizing how difficult those first 100 days can be. They were a little easier for me because of that background, but the first 100 days, the college presidents talk about it and they laugh and they joke and they say, you feel like you're drinking water out of a fire hose. And you do feel like that sometimes. There's a whole lot coming at you. There's a whole lot of expectations and demands. You need to be here. You need to speak at Rotary. You need to go to this alumni event. You need to meet people at this church. You need to meet these students. You need to go to the volleyball game, the soccer game. And it's a lot coming at you very, very, very fast, very quickly in those first 100 days. And, my advice is just try to keep a cool head and take one day at a time. Never forget that you need to carve out time for yourself and your family and who you are, whatever makes you tick, whatever helps you relax. For me, it's reading and traveling and getting away, with my family and going to the lake and things like that. You need to remember to do things like that because you cannot do this job with a sprinter's mentality. You have to look at it as a marathon, and you have to look at the long term, and you have to know that you can only do so much in 24 hours. And tomorrow the sun's going to come up and you're going to start over. And it certainly helps if you've gotten a good night's sleep. You can pull all-nighters and work for a little bit, but boy, that wears you down very, very quickly. I wouldn't run it with the sprinter's mentality. I would look at the long run. And you do have to celebrate successes. We had a lot of successes early on, and sometimes we stopped to celebrate, and sometimes I pushed everybody to the next level, and we should have just stopped and celebrated every place along the way. Every time we crossed a new milestone, we should have stopped and celebrated. I'm the kind that once we cross that milestone, I'm so focused on the next one, we don't stop and celebrate enough. And, like graduation, every year at graduation, I look at a calendar and I say, okay, how many days is it before the first wave of students come back? And it's usually about 100. So I say, okay, my executive team, let's get together and put a list together of 100 things we're going to accomplish this summer. Something as small as maybe an office move or a new hire or renovating a classroom or whatever. So rolling out a new software program or having a shred day where you bring the shredder in, the shredding company, and shred a lot of things and digitize them. So, every year we've accomplished 100 things during the course of the summer. And we publish that list and everybody sees it. And, I keep thinking, should I kind of give people a break and let them celebrate graduation and just do some things over the summer that, they feel like is important? But so far we've just pushed ahead. But one of these summers we'll probably just sort of celebrate and get ready for the next year without a very demanding 100 item list.
I can well imagine that would be demanding. What comes to mind is maybe make your list, keep it at 100 things, but maybe put part of that list is, what are you doing for yourself personally? What are you doing for yourself professionally? What are you doing for the college?
That's right, because all those things are important. And, employees have to be happy. They have to be content. They have to feel like you appreciate them. So I try to spend a little bit of my time walking around. It's a fine line between being intrusive and hovering and giving them their distance, but at the same time showing interest. I want everybody here to feel like that I'm interested in their area, whether it's maintenance or, basketball or volleyball or English or whatever. I want everybody to feel like, wow, he's interested in what we're doing. We're important. So you have to balance that with appearing like you're hovering and looking over people's shoulder. You don't ever want to do that. So that's the worst thing you can do. The second worst thing you can do is not show any interest at all, not making people feel like that they're special.
It's a fine line.
It is.
And like that old saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
That's right. And I believe that.
Yeah. someone aspiring to sit in a chair, what advice would you give that person who wants to be the president of his or her own university?
Well, I would think long and hard about it, but when you make that decision, make it right. Don't second guess yourself and don't wonder, was this the right decision? You can't look back. Once you jump off a cliff into a lake, once you leave that ledge, you can't take it back. So make sure it's what you want to do. It's very rewarding. It's very frustrating, all in the same day. But you have to make the decision right. It's just like anything else in life. You make the decision, and more than 50% of it is working at making it right. If you spend a lot of time second guessing what you're doing, you're wasting time where you could be doing something, productive or creative.
Sounds like life. If you're going to live life, live it fully. Don't live it halfway.
That's right.
So, last question. What's next for Dewey Clark? What makes you excited about what you're doing and what's next?
Well, continuing to work here, obviously, and try to get Wesleyan to where the original founders envisioned, which was 2,000 students. So before I got here, the all-time record was about 850. So we went from 575, we blew by 850, we blew by 950, we blew by 1050, and we're well over 1,100. So I'd like to continue to work on that and leave it in much better shape than when I found it. And then probably the last thing I'll do is turn my dissertation into a book. I did my dissertation. My PhD is in management, and I did my dissertation on the leadership lessons of Joseph from the Old Testament. And I want to turn that into a book and a lecture series and just help young people in that regard. So that's probably the last thing I'll do.
That's great. Well, after you've done that, then you can die, right? No, we hope not.
That's right. Enjoy life.
Absolutely. It's folks such as yourself who really take the time to know other people, to spend the time with them. And you're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it to help others. And that's a real feather in your cap. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
It's been a real pleasure, Dewey. And again, thank you much. Best of luck. And if we can do anything to help you, feel free to reach out. Thanks for listening this week. And a special thank you to this week's special guest, Dr. Dewey Clark, President of North Carolina Wesleyan College. Thank you, Dewey. Always a pleasure. Our next guest is Carol Aslanian, President and founder of Aslanian Market Research at Education Dynamics. Carol will be talking with us about how the demographics of students has changed and will give us some strategies on how to cope with the new normal of post-traditional students who make up 73% of all students currently enrolled in higher education institutions. If you like this podcast, please take a minute to subscribe to the show. And if you're listening on the Apple Podcast app, would you please take a moment to give us a rating and review? You can find out more information and show notes at changinghighered.com. And if you have guests and/or other topics you'd like to hear about, please email us at podcast@changinghighered.com to let us know. Remember, creating sustainable higher ed institutions requires three things: taking a holistic view of your institution, aligning strategies, structures, and processes, and ensuring stakeholders are attuned to where you're going. Without any of those three things, you won't get your institution where you want it to go. Until next time.